Hey everyone, I'm Charting Man Dan with the Chart Guys, joined here by Jake from Psychedelic Vantage on both Twitter and YouTube. And I suggest giving them a follow because they are one of my go-to sources for fundamental information regarding the psychedelic sector. I'm certainly very comfortable when I look at the charts, but there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of which companies have trials and data and things like that coming out, which we have to be aware of if we're going to be in positions, because last thing you want to do is buy something and then, oh, data comes out you didn't know and a big move that you weren't prepared for. So give them a follow. Thanks for joining us here, Jake.
Dan, thanks for having me on. It's great to be speaking with you today.
So we've done a couple calls in the past, but today we're going to look at some of the major players in the psychedelic sector. I know for me personally, I've been putting out that I'm a lot less interested in cannabis stocks in the short term here, and I'm focusing shifting my focus to psychedelics. Reason being, fundamental backdrop, just in terms of time, in terms of what can take place over the next couple of years, what's most likely and what's not. So we're just going to dive right into it here and start looking at some of the major charts. And Jake's going to give us a bit of insight as we go along in terms of which names are having what coming up. And we're going to start with what my understanding is one of the major names, CMPS, one of the leaders in the space. And I'll do a little TA first, and then you can go afterwards. So, bigger
Awesome.
picture, we just hit an all-time low, which is never a good thing. We had an earnings report that had a bearish reaction. We're in a clear weekly downtrend, and a lot has to shift on this chart if we're going to see. I mean, this reminds me of a cannabis chart, in all honesty, just because of the long, prolonged downtrend weakness. So, what's the deal with Compass here? I might have called it Canopy. What's the deal with Compass, and what do we have coming up here fundamentally?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of what caused the drop with Compass is the fact that their second phase three trial it got pushed back by a full year. So that's why it's trading a bit weaker, I would say. They're looking at psilocybin, a synthetic formulation proprietary to the company called COMP360 in treatment-resistant depression. It's when someone has failed two or more treatments in a current depressive episode. Again, the big news is that data got pushed back by a year. However, for their first phase three trial, we will be getting results in Q2 of 2025. That's always subject to change, but that's what we know of right now. And Dan, as I'm sure you know, Compass, usually what happens with Compass, it affects the whole sector. So that data readout in Q2 of 2025 is going to be very important for the entire space.
Yeah, and usually, it has some of the most dollar volume traded, but that has been shifting a little bit recently as it seems like the social media space, what I call the herd, is focusing more on MindMed, which we'll go to in just a moment here. But just to wrap up Compass, simple statement from a weekly perspective: if 661 is resistance, it's just a weekly lower high, and the bears still have full control. And this is the kind of setup where, I never like just entering and scaling in and building a position on a name that's in a long-term downtrend. I would rather miss the bottom and buy 20% higher if it means that I'm buying into bullish momentum. So the way that I'm going to approach the space is very much in that manner. And so, I'm keeping an eye on all of these names, but cheap doesn't mean anything to me. And I have to see progress that shows me there's buying volume and uptrends. And so I'm going to be patiently waiting before deploying any kind of significant capital on any kind of chart that's in a prolonged downtrend, such as CMPS currently is. Next up, we got MindMed. So MindMed, as I mentioned, let's just talk dollar volume. So CMPS, roughly speaking, 20-day average volume, we're looking at about $6-7 million a day. And MindMed, 20-day average volume, we're looking at roughly the same. It's about, well, seven,
Really?
7 or 8. This
Hmm.
past few days has been very high. You're talking $28 million traded, but this was a spurt, and we got to talk about RFK Jr. So this was in response to some tweets from, of course, the Trump win. RFK Jr. with communications with Trump. Is he going to get a cabinet position? We don't know. Maybe not. But he puts out favorable tweets and statements about the psychedelic space, if you want to talk on that a bit.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to see the reaction from with these stocks with RFK. I actually got sent an analyst report from from Jeffries or Cantor Fitzgerald. I guess it's, what's interesting about seeing the stocks react off what RFK is saying is, you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not necessarily pro psychedelic pharma, which is what these companies are. Maybe for your audience, a little bit of a differentiator with this space is that this is, these companies are looking to get FDA approval specifically for mental health disorders and addiction. Never, and as many know, RFK is not necessarily pro pharma. But nevertheless, he does recognize the potential of psychedelics to treat mental health and addiction, and it's definitely brought a lot of eyes on these stocks. Clearly, mixed in with I'm sure XBI running up a bit here. But yeah, no, it's great to see eyes on the space again, especially ahead of a lot of big data readouts from a lot of different companies.
Yeah, and so it's something to keep an eye on, but perhaps where the overlap is research. He'll probably be for research, and obviously, that can help the sector if we get positive results.
Yep.
So technically speaking, MNMD is the most progress long term. This is a 3 month chart, and we had a big run up where we ran 500% plus, and now we're looking for a long term higher low. And so if these bulls can hold the $5 range where we just came from and break the recent $12 top, that's going to be a long-term uptrend on all time frames that I watch. And so no other name in this sector is close to shaping up, putting in such a long-term kind of bottom end pattern. As far as the weekly time frame, we just had that high volume move up, but short term we're rejecting from clear resistance here. 983 is a key level to be focusing on. And, we just had a big run up. We had a bearish doji candle that indicates some buyer exhaustion. And now we have that consolidation. And so I'm watching for response to first hourly oversold conditions. If we get there, there's a support level down at 785. We certainly want to be buying on consolidation rather than, into an overbought breakout, but need to ensure that the retracement size of this consolidation using our Fibonacci retracements doesn't give back more than half of the move that we
Hmm.
just saw. And so that's down at, 766 roughly. So we want to see the bulls hold that to not, last thing you want to do is take a big step forward and then take a big step back. You want a big step forward, small step back. That's what an uptrend is made from. And what fundamentals are we need to be paying attention to for MNMD here coming up?
So something to note about MindMed is they're the best, they're the most well capitalized company in the space. $295 million in cash. They have, they're planning on initiating three phase three trials, two of them in generalized anxiety disorder and one in major depressive disorder. I guess something to note though is in terms of near-term catalysts specific to MindMed, that's going to be a 2026 event with those phase three trials. However, as we know, Compass Pathways that even though it's not the same drug that MindMed's working with, those results in Q2 of 2025 could have an effect on MindMed stock price. Also, if that data is not good, also it could be negative as well for the entire space. So that's where I'm looking at with MindMed, and I'm excited to see when they initiate those phase three trials.
Yeah, I want to talk about timeline a little bit because with these, these sectors, cannabis and psychedelics, they're so high risk and high reward because it's a shifting legal environment.
Hmm.
But what goes along with that is number one, not a lot of dollar volume traded, not a lot of institutions and all that. And so when you have these big long windows of before anything gets done, as anybody that trades the cannabis space knows, that favors the bears in the sense that you have to have a pretty steady amount of buying volume to sustain an uptrend. Otherwise, you could just have the long, slow bleeds and the fades. So it's definitely important. 2026, as far as I'm concerned, in markets is forever away,
Yes, yes.
and we just have to keep that in mind that it's a long, slow road. And my style is obviously buying into the momentum, locking in profits, not just buying and holding for 5 years. Everybody has different styles, but just be aware that time is not the bull's friend in these sectors.
Yeah, when there's no news flow, especially with these drug development companies, it's definitely not uncommon to see a slow bleed, even if everything with the company is doing okay. the fact that there's no news, it definitely has an effect. One thing, Dan, I will address with the institutional ownership, actually, we have been seeing a lot more institutional ownership in the last fundraising rounds for MindMed, CYBN, and from very top-notch healthcare investors. So I guess we'll see if they continue to participate in these fundraising rounds. And again, a lot of these companies will have to raise, I think, somewhat soon, except MindMed might be the exception where I think they're going to be good for a little while longer.
Yeah, and that's a great point. People need to understand dilution,
Yep.
convertible debt, and things like that, especially with a long timeline, because the reason these companies are public are so they can sell stocks to raise funds. And when you sell stock, you dilute shareholder value and it puts downward pressure longer term.
Mm.
All right, moving on to ATAI. So we've got earnings today. Is it after hours? Yes, has not happened yet.
My thinking is, yeah, so some of the estimates aren't always correct. My thinking is they're gonna probably wait till after CPI data comes out tomorrow. I could be wrong. Maybe it even gets pushed back to next week, but it is coming up soon. And there's a lot I'm looking for in this earnings report, for sure. If you wanted me to touch on it or go to the TA first, up to you.
Sure, we'll do TA first. So big move up, following MindMed in the daily move, the volume spike, but has not topped out yet. We broke the high of yesterday today, so remaining strong
Mm.
and keeping an eye on $1. When, back to my penny stock trading days, that $1 level is so crucial, both as resistance when you're coming up to it and as support when you're coming down to it. Because it does drastically change the trading in the sense that, if you're a 90-cent stock, you can trade, 941, you can have a bunch of decimal places. And as soon as you get over $1, you've got one less decimal place. So every tick, it becomes more valuable. And that's, once you clear $1, it's a big win. But in this instance, we had a hold of $1, and we can
Oh
see
yeah.
going all the way back here to the last year, end of last year. I mean, we
Mm.
held 114 in 2023 and then 102. And then most recently we held 103 and then 104. So clearly the bulls are defending $1 and we just had a, 60% bounce in 2 weeks off of that level. So it's very easy to say that $1 is the most important support level. If it breaks, it's a big red flag. If it holds, we're building a longer term base. And now we're looking at 170 resistance coming into play. 285 is the long term most important level, but definitely a strong, hard move off of support. And this is just an example of where you have a technical reason to hold a key level. Then you throw a dash of news in there and you get, a big time high volume move. So tell us a bit more about what you're looking for in the earnings report.
So definitely going to look at their cash position. This is a company that probably will need to raise. My guess would be middle of next year, or maybe March of 2025. However, along with their cash position, they do own 10% of Compass Pathways. They did recently sell some of that stake in Compass Pathways to extend their runway, which I'm actually a shareholder in ATAI. I actually like it. Will give them more time to put out data before they raise. So I guess, what I'm maybe anticipating is through their strategic investment in Beckley SciTech, we might expect to see perhaps on the day of earnings a separate press release looking at 5-MeO DMT in alcohol use disorder, a very, very, very powerful short-acting psychedelic compound. Small trial, but important. Also, another short acting, shorter trip time compound, ELE 101. It's intravenous psilocin. We might expect to see data from that as well. Going to be looking to see if they're on track to initiate phase 2 trials with their internal programs, fully owned programs. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing those readouts though, and also getting more clarity on the timeline for what's their biggest readout in the near term is a phase 2B trial with BPL-003, 5-MeO DMT in treatment-resistant depression. I want to see if the company can give us a little bit more clarity on when that trial is wrapping up and when to expect data. Something that is very cool about ATAI is due to their very large pipeline, there's the opportunity for many catalysts over the coming months and years. With that said, though, and their current cash position, I also wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe um, consolidate that pipeline a bit, but they're very flexible. They have the stake and Compass Pathways. They have a loan term facility with Hercules Capital. So there's a lot to be looking out for ATAI, and but those data readouts I'm hoping will come with the earnings report this week maybe.
And one note on volume here, it's much different than CMPS and MNMD. Our average daily volume, we're looking at less than $2 million traded. So, roughly a quarter of what some of these other names are putting up. So again, it's a penny stock, got to treat it like a penny stock. This whole sector is extremely high risk, high reward, as we know. So, any capital you're allocating here needs to be your gambling money, essentially. And hopefully everybody understands that. Just want to make that clear. CYBN, another name that has a good amount of popularity on social media.
Oh yeah.
We've got a weekly uptrend here, so there's been some progress over the last couple of months. 1277 is a resistance level that we're battling right now. And, we got up to 1280, but pretty much a double top at that level right now. As far as the daily chart, didn't really see as much benefit from the headlines. Definitely some, but not what a bowl of CYBN will look at MNMD and ATAI and say, what the heck? Why aren't we going up like that? Well, there is clear resistance. That's one reason. Dollar volume here is, again, very small, more in line with ATAI at a couple million a day. And it looks like we potentially have earnings this week as well. Tell
Yes.
us a bit about CYBN.
Yeah, Simon. Dan, you might have. I think they hit a low actually after the reverse split. That might be something interesting to note. After that happened, the stock's been, it's been steadily going up. I do like how Cybin is spreading out their catalysts in the coming months. So what I'm looking out for, and many others in the space, when they might initiate their phase 3 trials. Again, due to Compass, the delays on Compass, Cybin and MindMed are trailing very close behind Compass Pathways. But again, we need to get that confirmation to see if they initiate the phase 3 trial soon. Another upcoming catalyst will be 12-month data from their trial in major depressive disorder. So we're going to get to see, after people with depression were dosed twice with psilocybin, how many of them, are in remission or no longer meet the criteria for depression a full 12 months later. That's a big deal in my opinion. It is a small trial, however, but I'm very excited to see that data. And last but not least, in probably around January, we're expecting data with CYB004 in generalized anxiety disorder. It's deuterated DMT. I guess maybe for your audience, important to note the space. A lot of people in the space are paying very close attention to what's called, these short acting psychedelics that, someone has to stay in a clinic for only maybe 2 hours rather than 6 to 8 hours with psilocybin and LSD. So I think a lot of people are going to be paying close attention to see, do we get the same benefits from a short acting treatment? That's going to be in January. That's a program where, I wouldn't be shocked if it gets breakthrough therapy designation. Now, with all the positive news coming up, or potential positive, we don't know if the data is going to be positive or not. But with all those catalysts, something to note with Cybin, again, another name I hold, they probably will need to raise capital by early next year. And again, as a shareholder, I'm hoping that they can wait out that raise until they release data. But time will tell, and we'll see. There's definitely some upcoming milestones with them. They currently have 130 as of June 30th, $130 million USD in the bank. Sounds like a lot, but as they move into larger trials, they're going to have to probably raise again unless they find a partnership with a larger player.
Yeah, and one more note on my penny stock experience. Again, I haven't looked at the share structure for CYBN, but generally in penny stocks, what would happen is you have your authorized shares, you have your outstanding shares start to get close to how many you can maximum dish out, and then you do a reverse split, which automatically knocks down your outstanding shares and creates a whole bunch more room for dilution. So essentially, in my experience, reverse split of a penny stock means more dilution is coming.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. And actually, I'd like to ask you, Dan, because this is obviously you know much more about this than me. I'm hearing, CYBN, they only have 19 million shares outstanding, is my understanding. It's a very tight float. Do you think that I've seen other people mention this as well? Do you think that that could make the stock more receptive to positive news potentially?
Well, with anything, a lack of liquidity. I dislike a lack of liquidity as a trader because I want to be able to get in and get out.
Uh,
But when there's a lack of liquidity, it goes both ways. Where if
okay.
everybody, just imagine a small door, if everybody wants to get in at the same time, you shoot the price up. But if everybody wants to get out at the same time, the price collapses. So it definitely works both ways. But generally speaking, the tighter the float, which is a bit different than outstanding shares. It's the free trading shares, but
Okay.
tighter the float is, the more reactive, the more explosive the moves are once that volume comes in.
Got
But
it.
again, just calling it like it is, the chart, the last 5 days is not showing that. If it were, if that were the case, we would be doing the same thing as ATAI and MNMD. So just
Hmm.
got to call it like it is in terms of, it's a nice move up 20-25%, but it's not the, MindMed 100% or whatever. What did we just do? I got to move your face here. 50% move that we just saw. Um, so yeah, it's worth making note. Again, if you're going to invest in anything, you've got to read financial statements, understand share structure, and you can anticipate, as you are doing, you can anticipate dilution's probably coming here. You're ready for it. You factor it in, because again, all of my penny stock lessons of learning money was buying and holding something, not understanding dilution and convertible debt, and then going back and like, oh, this is why I lost money because I didn't understand this concept. So very important. Last name here, a name that I was not familiar with, GHRS. Again, a low volume name. Weekly volume here is, 2 million. So this is the lowest volume name that we're looking at. We're pretty range bound long term. This is over the last year plus of trading, but clearly the 14s is the resistance zone, and clearly, 5 to 6 is the support zone, and we can very easily trade within this range for a long time. What do you know about GH Research?
It's a very interesting company, and I'm not necessarily surprised you haven't been paying too close attention to them because not many people are even who follow the psychedelic medicine space. They're a very under the radar, low key company. They're very quiet. They were one of the earliest movers in the space, filed a lot of early patents on 5-MeO DMT. Their whole pipeline is only 5-MeO DMT and different routes of administration, whether it's inhalation, intravenous or intranasal through the nose as well. Maybe something different about this company compared to the other ones. 60% institutional ownership, and the names of these institutions are very, very well respected. There might be something about this company that they know that others in the space don't know. I don't know what it is. As you pointed out, not a lot of volume on this name, which is interesting. Nevertheless, it is a company to really keep a close eye out for because they have a phase 2B trial with 80 patients, also again in treatment resistant depression, looking at 5-MeO DMT. They're dosing it a specific way. It's called an individualized dosing regimen of 5-MeO DMT. This is a trial that I think even people outside of the psychedelic medicine space are going to be looking at, even people who just look at the neuropsychiatry drug development space in general. That trial could read out by the end of the year or early Q1 2025. I'm expecting pretty good results from this. Again, of course, we don't know for sure. In their phase 2A trial, they had 8 patients with treatment resistant depression in the trial. 7 days later after treatment, 7 out of 8 patients no longer met the criteria for having depression anymore, which it's a very big deal, especially when, again, we're talking about treatment resistant depression when nothing else has worked for these patients. So I'm looking forward to this larger data set coming again around the end of the year, early next year, and we'll see what it looks like. Something I always try to tell our viewers on our YouTube channel is in when you look at clinical trial data in general, a lot of the times you'll see very promising results in phase 2. And then once you move to phase 3, when there's more trial participants, the data tends to not look as good. At the same time, psychedelics are a bit de-risked as we do have a lot of prior academic studies and trial data from Compass, MindMed to show that there's a good chance it will work, but again, not guaranteed. So, very excited to see the data from GH Research.
Awesome. Well, Jake, thank you very much for all of your insight. We'll do this again in another month or two.
Absolutely.
Again, Psychedelic Vantage on Twitter and YouTube. Make sure and give them a follow, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on, Dan.